This famous Ghazwa-e-Hind, which is the Pakistani groups use it.
We are different from the Hindus in every possible aspect of life. Our religion is different. Our customs are different. Our traditions are different. Our thoughts are different. Our ambitions are different.
Ghazwa is actually just as jihad is the war, a holy war or war for religious purposes. Ghazwa is a battle. And there's ostensibly a saying of Prophet Muhammad.
इंसानियत की तारीख में सिर्फ दो रियासतें हैं जो कलमे की बुनियाद पर बनी हैं.
That before the end times, the final biggest war between good and evil and between Islam and Kufr is going to take place in Hind, which is India, which is the land east of the river Indus.
पहली जो थी उसका नाम है रियासत तैयबा, क्योंकि तैयबा जो है वो नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने उसको नाम दिया था, और जबकि कुरान में उसका नाम है यसरब, या अहले यसरिबा ला मुकाम लकुम फरजिउ, ये कुरान में नाम है उसका, जो आज जिसको मदीना अल मुनव्वरा कहा जाता है.
Americans pay a lot of attention to their own end time prophecies, but getting into that whole theater, they have totally neglected this.
और दूसरी रियासत जो है वो उसके 1300 साल के बाद अल्लाह ताला ने ये आपकी बनाई है कलमे की बुनियाद के ऊपर.
It means a lot to people who believe in it.
Please don't forget the story of Pakistan.
That recent terror attack in Pahalgam, 28 Hindu tourists killed. It's just awful, and it really sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the initial signs, well, they point pretty clearly towards Pakistan-backed jihadi groups. That signature is hard to miss.
And what makes it even more disturbing, perhaps, is the timing. Wasn't Pakistan's army chief, General Asim Munir, giving some pretty fiery speech just a week before?
That's right. Full of, hyper-nationalistic, anti-India stuff, talking about Islamic identity, martyrdom, resistance. It really makes you wonder about the connection.
Exactly. Which kind of leads us into this whole concept we wanted to unpack today, this Ghazi Complex in the Pakistani military leadership. It seems tied up with Ghazwa-e-Hind.
It does. And Ghazwa-e-Hind, it's important to remember, isn't just one single idea. For some, it's maybe more metaphorical, like a spiritual thing.
Right, a personal struggle.
But for the more radical types, especially the jihadi groups we see active, they take it very literally as a call to actually conquer India. And these groups often have links back to Pakistan.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, really. To try and understand this Ghazi complex. Where did it start? How has it, steered Pakistan?
Yeah.
And what's the impact on India? We've looked at some sources that shed light on this whole ideology.
And it's definitely not something new. The roots of a militarized Pakistan go way back. I mean, right after partition, the first couple of army chiefs were British.
Frank Messervy and Douglas Gracie, yeah.
Exactly. Their main job was just, administration, setting up the army, dealing with the chaos of partition. The whole Ghazi idea wasn't really front and center then.
It was more practical, logistical stuff. But then came Field Marshal Ayub Khan, first native-born chief, and his coup in 1958. That feels like a major turning point.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just about him taking power. It cemented the army's dominance over the civilian government, that power imbalance. It's basically been the story ever since.
And that coup, it wasn't just politics, right?
Yeah.
It sort of set the stage for the military seeing itself as the ultimate guardian, the decider, maybe even laying groundwork for that Ghazi self-image later.
Precisely. And that's when you start seeing the Ghazi narrative becoming more explicit in how the military saw itself. Look at the 1965 war with India under General Mohammad Musa.
Militarily, that was basically a stalemate, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No clear winner.
Pretty much. But you wouldn't know that from how it was framed inside Pakistan. It got turned into this heroic jihad, a victory of faith against a bigger enemy.
So that's where the myth-making really kicks in, spinning a draw into some kind of divinely backed win, feeding that idea of the army, the leader, as a Ghazi.
Exactly. And Ghazi historically just meant an Islamic warrior fighting non-Muslims, an honor. But in the Pakistani military context, it became something deeper, a kind of sacred duty tied to this idea of never-ending conflict with India, defending Islam on the subcontinent.
But that whole narrative must have taken a massive hit in 1971. The war in East Pakistan, Bangladesh breaking away, and the surrender of 93,000 soldiers. I mean, that's huge. The biggest surrender since World War II, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was staggering, a complete shattering of that illusion of invincibility that the Ghazi myth had built up. You'd think that would force a major rethink.
Yeah, how does the Ghazi story survive that?
Well, interestingly, instead of abandoning it, it seems like it got re-engineered, maybe? under General Zia-ul-Haq,
Yeah.
who took over in the late 70s.
Ah, Zia. He really steered things differently, didn't he? Put jihad right at the center of military thinking.
He absolutely did. You saw this systematic Islamization push within the army itself. Madrasas becoming more militarized, terror groups being actively supported and built up.
And this was all happening under the umbrella of fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
right? With quite a bit of help from the U.S. and Saudi Arabia at the time.
That's the context, yes. And the long-term fallout. Well, we're still dealing with it. Groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, the ones constantly targeting India, they really grew powerful during Zia's era.
So even though Zia died in that plane crash in '88, the structures and the mindset he fostered, they didn't go away.
Not at all. He left behind this, well, toxic legacy is a fair description. A radicalized military core, very influential hardline clerics, and this deep-seated reliance on using proxy warfare, using these militant groups as a foreign policy tool.
And you can even see this ideology reflected symbolically, can't you? Like the names they give their missiles.
Oh, definitely. It's quite revealing. Ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, named after medieval invaders, Abdali, Ghaznavi, Shaheen, Gauri, Babur, Ra'ad. There's even talk of an ICBM called Timur.
And the irony there, these are figures who invaded the very lands that became Pakistan, coming from outside.
Exactly. But in the popular, or at least the official Pakistani narrative, they're celebrated as Islamic heroes, as Ghazis. It shows a very particular reading of history, doesn't it? Prioritizing this idea of conquest, of historical grievance.
It really does speak volumes about a certain worldview. It suggests this focus on past glories or perceived religious destiny seems to overshadow maybe more practical things like building the nation, fixing the economy, living peacefully. History as a weapon almost. That's a good way to put it. And this Ghazi mantle, it didn't die with Zia. You see later leaders picking up. Think about General Pervez Musharraf.
Kargil, 1999. That whole misadventure nearly led to all-out war. And then his coup, sidelining democracy again. And how did he end up in exile? Pretty much disgraced.
A familiar pattern, perhaps.
Yeah.
Then you had General Bajwa. He came in with his Bajwa doctrine, promising stability, economic fixes.
But his time in charge was full of accusations too, wasn't it? Rigging elections, meddling in politics. And the economy wasn't exactly booming when he left either. Seems like pursuing these other ambitions often costs the country dearly.
It often does. Which brings us to the current chief, General Asim Munir. He's known to be quite devout, a Hafiz-e-Quran, former head of the ISI. He seems to really fit this Ghazi Complex mold.
So connecting back to the Pahalgam attack is the thinking that this might be part of his strategy, doubling down on using jihad as foreign policy, even while Pakistan's facing huge problems at home. It certainly looks that way based on his rhetoric and past actions. It seems like a return to, or maybe a continuation of, that playbook, despite the internal chaos.
And that chaos is significant. I mean, look at the economy. Growth forecasts are dismal, under 2% for next year. India's looking at over 6.5%.
The numbers are stark. Foreign reserves are incredibly low, barely 6 weeks of imports covered as of April. Massive external debt, especially to China, over $130 billion total.
And inflation. People are really hurting. Food prices up over 35%. You can see why there's public unrest building. It feels like the state's priorities are elsewhere.
And politically, it's just as messy. Is there really a functional democracy? The last election was widely seen as rigged, with major opposition suppressed.
Right. The military's hand seems to be everywhere, influencing the courts, the politicians. Parliament feels, well, pretty toothless.
With Imran Khan locked up and no clear, strong civilian alternative allowed to emerge, it really does look like the army is pulling the strings from the shadows, not through proper institutions.
And hovering over all of this is the terrorism issue. The numbers are just mind-boggling. Nearly 80 terror groups based in Pakistan. Something like 45 actively launching attacks.
According to the South Asia Terrorism Portal, yes. And Pakistan consistently ranks near the very top, like second globally, in lists of countries most affected by terrorism.
But the sources we looked at suggest this isn't just bad luck or failure to control it. It's presented more like a deliberate strategy, right? Yeah. Using terror as statecraft.
That's certainly the assessment of many observers, and there's a long history to back it up. The military and intelligence, particularly the ISI, have a track record of cultivating and using these groups as proxies for regional goals.
The U.S. even calls Pakistan a terrorist safe haven.
They do, and we've seen the results aimed at India before the '93 Mumbai blasts, the horrific 26/11 attacks in Mumbai, carried out by groups like Leti and Jaish-e-Mohammed, groups with well-known ISI links.
And now with Pahalgam, Indian intelligence is apparently providing evidence, satellite images, intercepted communications pointing towards Pakistani involvement again.
That's what's being reported, yes. Showing direct links, exposing safe havens, training camps. It fits the established pattern, sadly.
You know, looking back at all these generals, Ayub, Yahya, Zia, Musharraf, the ones who really seem to embrace that Ghazi persona, it rarely ends well for them personally, does it? Assassinations, coups turning on them, exile, disgrace.
It's a strikingly consistent historical trend, a very bitter end for many of them, and yet
the myth survives. Why?
it seems deeply embedded. You've got decades of radicalization within parts of the military itself, an education system that often pushes a very specific militaristic revisionist history, and frankly, a media landscape that frequently glorifies the army and this Ghazi narrative. It's self-perpetuating.
So the picture emerging of General Asim Munir is the latest in this line, fully embracing this Ghazi delusion, as some might call it.
That's the concern. It feels less like learning from past failures and more like, well, like he's determined to sprint down that same path to ruin where others merely stumbled.
It's a deeply worrying prospect, not just for Pakistan, but for the whole region. This Ghazi complex, this ideology, it just seems to have had such devastating consequences.
It really has. This cycle you mentioned, grand ideological ambitions leading to military failures, political chaos at home, economic disaster, and then the eventual downfall of the leaders themselves. It just keeps repeating.
So the final thought, the thing for you, the listener, to really mull over is this. Can Pakistan ever break this cycle?
Right. Unless there's a fundamental shift, a real confrontation and rejection of this Ghazi fantasy within the military establishment, and unless genuine civilian control is finally established and sticks, well, does it just remain stuck? Trapped as this dangerous entity, nuclear-armed, yes, but also ideologically charged, economically broken, and ultimately a threat to itself as much as to anyone else. That really seems to be the critical challenge facing Pakistan today.
This famous Ghazwa-e-Hind, which is the Pakistani groups use it.
We are different from the Hindus in every possible aspect of life. Our religion is different. Our customs are different. Our traditions are different. Our thoughts are different. Our ambitions are different.
Ghazwa is actually just as Jihad is the war, a holy war or war for religious purposes. Ghazwa is a battle. And there's ostensibly a saying of Prophet Muhammad.
इंसानियत की तारीख में सिर्फ दो रियासतें हैं जो कलमे की बुनियाद पर बनी हैं.
That before the end times, the final biggest war between good and evil and between Islam and Kufr is going to take place in Hind, which is India, which is the land east of the river Indus.
पहली जो थी उसका नाम है रियासत तैयबा, क्योंकि तैयबा जो है वो नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने उसको नाम दिया था, और जबकि कुरान में उसका नाम है यसरब, या अहले यसरिबा ला मुकाम लकुम फरजिउ, ये कुरान में नाम है उसका, जो आज जिसको मदीना अल मुनव्वरा कहा जाता है.
Americans pay a lot of attention to their own end time prophecies, but getting into that whole theater, they have totally neglected this.
और दूसरी रियासत जो है वो उसके 1300 साल के बाद अल्लाह ताला ने ये आपकी बनाई है कलमे की बुनियाद के ऊपर.
It means a lot to people who believe in it.
Please don't forget the story of Pakistan.
ماضي كسب